Mr. Chancellor, born in Vancouver, British Columbia, Denise Chong is a third-generation Chinese-Canadian who, after several years in the federal public service, most of which was spent as an advisor to the Prime Minister of the day, turned to writing. A graduate of both the University of British Columbia and the University of Toronto, her books evoke everyday happenings and relationships amidst the extraordinary circumstances of war, communism, immigration, and racism. Denise Chong's first and her most recent book are seminal works that chronicle the immigrant experience through tracing the lives and times of Canada's early Chinese families. The Concubine's Children is the story of Denise Chong's own family and reveals much of her own history that had been hidden from but shaped her family. Lives of the Family is the history of the earliest Chinese settlers in and around Ottawa. It explores the trajectory of a universal immigrant experience and reveals the immigrant's tenacity in adapting to a new world. Her edited Penguin anthology of stories by Canadian women, many of whom are of transnational identities, reflects Denise Chong's recognition of the multicultural quality of being Canadian. Her middle two books are a portrayal of courage and a paean to the freedom of expression and human rights. The Girl in the Picture is the biography of Kim Phuc, the Vietnamese girl in the iconic photo who was terribly burned in a napalm attack in 1972. It is one of the only books to describe everyday life in the wake of this war and to probe the war's lingering effect on all its participants. Agon Mao is the story of an ordinary man, a bus mechanic, who challenged his family's communist allegiance by defacing a portrait of Chairman Mao Zedong during the 1989 protests in Tiananmen Square. All her works reveal her commitment to the fundamental freedoms that we, as Canadians, enjoy, to human rights, to tolerance, and to the importance of history and tradition. An officer of the Order of Canada and the recipient of numerous honors and awards, Denise Chong is a dedicated, proud Canadian, which is nowhere made clearer than in her widely anthologized 1994 speech, Being Canadian. In it she wrote, and I quote, "My own sense of being Canadian is one of belonging. I belong to a family. I belong to a community of values," end of quote. Mr. Chancellor, I present to you Denise Chong, that you may confer upon her the degree of Doctor of Letters, honoris causa.
Ladies and gentlemen, I now invite Dr. Denise Chong to deliver the convocation address. Dr. Chong.
Well, first of all, I want to say that this isn't the normal life of an author. You know, when we prepare to give a reading, you console yourself by thinking few people will show up. And so my worst nightmare is that there's one person sitting in the back row. And so I go up to them and I say, "I'm about to start. Would you like to move up to the front?" And they say, no, that's okay. I have to leave early." Not today. Chancellor, Principal and Vice Chancellor, Chair of the Board, distinguished guests, families, friends, and my fellow graduating students. My grandfather, a poor man living in Vancouver's Chinatown and lonely without his wife in China, arranged for the purchase of my grandmother to be his concubine abroad. To pay her passage and to buy her someone else's Canadian birth certificate, then the only way to get around the ban on Chinese immigration, he indentured her as a lowly tea-house waitress, a profession seen in the Bachelor Society of Chinatown as but a way to woo men to spend money. It would take 2 generations upon my learning that it was my grandmother's waitressing wages that supported a family in Canada and in China to lift the shame from my grandmother's life. This afternoon, as each of you cross the convocation stage, our shared emotion will be pride. When I was in high school in Prince George, British Columbia, I wanted to go on to McGill. I kept alive the hope of any university at all with part-time jobs, sometimes running between them on the same day, cashiering at a grocery store, bookkeeping at a lock and key, teaching piano. I dreaded most my Sundays at a drive-in theater, where my job was to pop enough popcorn for the concession for the week ahead. In the schooling I imagined, I saw myself as a Westerner journeying east. Looking to a far horizon was in part owing to the times. Trudeau-mania had swept the nation, holding out a vision that a society could be generous and inclusive and confident. It was also a legacy of my childhood. Prince George, a logging town on the verge of a boom in the fast-growing north, imbued me with a sense of the frontier, which at once contains you and takes you out of yourself. Given the stretched finances of my parents, who envisaged that all 5 of their children might attend university, sending one outside the home province and clear across the country just wasn't going to happen. Eventually, eager to be at the heart of finding expression of being Canadian, I came east to Ottawa. I landed my first job as an economist with the federal government and went on to become an advisor to Prime Minister Trudeau. And when he retired, I embarked on a second career, writing. I am you so many years ago. Today, you leave behind the familiar, including Gertz, Thursday evenings at BDA, and OAP at Three Bears Park. Tomorrow, you venture into the unknown adult life. I offer you 2 signposts for the way ahead. 1, in your intellectual life, keep traveling in the direction of the unknown. The unknown may make you anxious, scared, or stressed, but hold fast to the certainty that your destination is always beyond. Don't be hemmed in by fear, nor let fear turn into self-pity. Your questioning, at times doubt, at times optimism, is the lifeblood of your imagination. Take this as affirmation that you are alive. 2, keep a sense of humility. It's easier to have a big ego and be self-satisfied. It's much harder to be humble. You may well deserve to swell with pride about your achievements, but humility, not pride, makes you a bigger person. The reverse of humility is smugness. To be smug is to slip into mediocrity. I write what I want to ponder. That's what keeps me invested to go beyond. Yet, between books, I worry. Is there a next manuscript in me? Then in my study, as I sit writing that manuscript, I find myself mopping my brow. But in my struggle, I am reminded of why I write, and I exult in the feeling of having transcended boundaries, of time, of generations, gender, class, religion, culture, country, and more. The unknown and humility go hand in hand. Without humility, we contrive boundaries. and the price is steep. We stifle our imagination. The world turns into us and them, and we lose that most important gift of the human condition, empathy. In my writing in my daily life, I strive to understand what it's like to walk in the shoes of the other, the homeless man sleeping on the subway grate, the orphan child and refugee of the war in Syria, and, yes, my grandmother. In my research for my family memoir, some spoke with derision about her, including how she once walked around Chinatown in a man's suit and a man's cap. How embarrassing, they said, for everybody. Then I met Bill Wong, now 94, who was behind the counter at Modernized Tailors the day my grandmother came in to order a custom-made man's suit. What was unusual, Bill told me, was that my grandmother herself designed the inside of the suit jacket to include extra pockets. She said she worried about carrying a handbag after once having it snatched. My wish for you is that in your intellectual life you will never feel too comfortable. Keep going beyond, and you will reap the reward of possibility. Guard your humility, and you'll be more prepared to have your thinking turned on its head. You'll choose complexity over simplicity, wider truths over narrow ones, and in understanding the world differently than you did before, you will already have changed it. Thank you, and congratulations to the class of 2014.